The Sig P320 can go off with just less than 1 mm pressure by squeezing the top of the slide. That means any good retention holster will make it go off. And if you're not sure about buying a 320 as your first gun or build one from scratch, so here are things you need to know and some alternative options. By the way, this is the video you want to check out and watch this guy repeatedly making the gun go off simply just by applying gentle pressure on the slide. So by 2023, there are about 100 or so alleged reports of the gun that just decided to go off on its own. At the time, it was such a strange thing that people couldn't exactly figure out why. With at least 80 individuals wounded, including the fatal incident that happened on an Air Force base, and there are definitely lots of videos showing that happening too. This goes all the way back to right around 2017 when this problem was discovered. Long story short, if a P320 was dropped at a specific angle, roughly at about 30-degree angle onto the back of the slide, that sudden jolt seems to be the reason why the gun goes off. No one touched the trigger, nothing, and it just went boom. And after years of shooting striker-fired pistols like the Glock and MP, I meant they were pretty reliable guns unless someone dicked around reducing the trigger pull weight to the point it became unsafe. But that's the user's fault, not a widespread issue coming straight out of the factory. So right around that time, SIG offered something called the Voluntary Upgrade Program. I think it was a free upgrade. And it basically upgraded all the parts like the trigger shoe and striker sear to be basically lighter. And so that no inertia-driven movement can easily drop the firing pin. At least that was the thing done to mitigate the issue back then.
You'll notice this safety leg, if I pull up on it, it'll just come straight up. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to pull that safety lever up. Same can be said for the sear. The sear can be pushed down with not a lot of force. The new versions, it's much more difficult to pull this safety lever up and push the sear down without the trigger actually being pulled.
If you look at the side-by-side picture, this one was the original design, and this one is the new one. This part right here made it so that the gun can't go off no matter what you do with it. But on the older design, any slight movement of the slide can drop the striker, and the tolerance of the parts were off. They also added the mechanical disconnector so the gun can't fire when it's out of battery. But that's if people are paying attention to all these recalls. If you don't follow up firearm news all the time, you probably have missed all of it, and you may have an older P320 with all the problems. But here is when it gets wild. Even after the upgrade, that's assuming you did the upgrade, there are still reports of the gun going off while inside people's holsters. There was a 2024 FBI report released. I will link that below. The report found that these discharges occurred during routine motions, holstering, unholstering, walking, climbing, or jostling the gun. And from one of the incidents, they found that the striker safety lock spring was only partially captured, which could allow the firing pin block to move out of place. The striker safety lock is meant to be the last line of defense preventing the striker from moving forward unless the trigger is pressed. If its spring is displaced, that safety could fail to stop a striker from hitting the primer. So basically, all the P320 models follow the same design as the original, whether with or without the free 2017 upgrade. Have the same core trigger design. The sear and safety are all the same. The post-2017 ones are safer, but the ones with those manual safeties offer an extra layer of safety against inadvertent trigger pulls. But any of them can still have uncommanded discharge if the internal safeties fail. Also, if you partially press the trigger while manipulating the slide, it can also cause the striker to drop from the sear notch without a full trigger pull. At this point, you may be asking, all right, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a gunsmith, I get the basic concept, but is building a Sig P320 from scratch still safe? So, you buy the FCU unit, and you buy your own grip, barrel, slide, and all the rest. So here's what you need to do. If you're going to build one, be sure to buy a FCU and slide internal parts made after 2017. You can tell by this notch and this disconnector. If you somehow got something pre-2017, which can happen because they are definitely out there floating around just like cars with recalls, and people never check their mail, so they never take them in to get them fixed. I would recommend buying factory OEM parts, and yes, you can buy aftermarket trigger like from Apex, and some of their products have higher tolerance to maintain the proper sear engagement angles and where it stops the over travel. At this point, I would not try to drastically reduce the sear engagement or reduce the trigger pull weight. It's simply too risky. The next thing is to avoid these 80% kit. Number one, they are time-consuming to set up, And with all the issues going on with the 320 right now, literally anything that is even slightly off will cause problems. When it comes to slides and grips, there are some slick slide designs out there for the 320, and they don't directly affect the trigger. But you still got to pay attention to the striker springs since it affects how hard it presses on the sear. After you put together the gun with the barrel and everything, do a thorough check, and the main thing you want to check is to rack the slide and go through the trigger reset sequence. You should hear the audible reset and feel it click. Also do it with the slide slightly out of battery. If everything is good, the trigger should not release the striker. Usually a stronger guide rod can ensure it goes in battery so it doesn't look like this. The next thing is the striker plunger. This right here should not protrude into the firing pin hole unless you depress the safety plunger. When you pull the trigger back, the plunger should up and clear the path for the striker. With the FCU, please don't modify the FCU. Just check to see how the sear and the trigger bar interact. Okay, so is it safe to build a 320? Well, the answer is yes, if done with 100% due diligence. I haven't had an uncommanded discharge with this particular gun yet, but it's not to say that it can never happen. Maybe it can, and I just don't know. But if you're not comfortable with it, then there are other reliable guns available on the market. If safety is a priority and you just need a firearm for protection and you don't want to go down this technical rabbit hole, here are some good options. If you're new to guns and you just want a quality firearm you can train with without all the fancy mods, the Walther PDP is definitely a good one. The Glock 19 is old, but it works. The FN509 is another one to consider, and the list goes on just to name a few. And all of them will actually be cheaper than building a 320 from scratch. Typically, if you go with an AXG grip and everything else, it can add up to be right around $1,000 or more if you choose to go with a fancy slide and barrel. So just find a local shooting range that lets you rent guns and go try a few and see what you like, because it's hard to just watch a couple videos. No amount of reviews or Reddit opinions will actually give you the actual experience without physically holding one in person. And when it comes to cost as a new gun owner, even a used Glock 19 can get the job done for right under $450. And if you like the modular design, another option is the Springfield Echelon. Remember, spending thousands on guns or upgrades won't improve your shooting if you haven't mastered the fundamentals like sight picture, trigger press, reset, and follow through. The Sig P320 might be the latest trend, and it's disappointing as is now with its safety concern. You don't want to get shot by it accidentally when carrying it in the car or in public, but most firearms are generally safe. So remember the big four. Finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Treat every gun as if it's loaded, know what's behind the target, and lastly, always point it in a safe direction when handling them.